What's going on, everybody? This is Brad, and we have another Regulation Battle Volume 1 video, and as you can tell, we are going into the garden today with the roses, as they have thorns, as Rosemon Tribal will be the focus of today's video, and we're going to be jumping into it right now. So starting off, why are we going into the Rosemon deck at all? I do want to give more options to people who are probably playing the Regulation Volume 1 format, who are going to be probably, I think it's at the start of April through May, so this format will be going on for the time period that it will be, but I do think this is a great time for people who are probably wondering if they should play Digimon at all. Give this format a try, because I do think this is going to be a format where you get to get a good taste of like early Digimon that probably hasn't been played in a while, unless you're playing some type of retro format with everybody. But the key factor is this is actually going to be a format that Bandai is putting up. If you haven't gotten your entry in, I don't know if the clock has closed yet, but get your entry in if you want to play at these events, wherever they may be. But if you don't, I still think that if you have friends or you have a local community or anyone in general, you should ask them if they want to play this format, because I think there's a really interesting concept for deck building as well as just enjoyment of the game. So that's why we're talking about it today. And this is one of the options that we have in a deck, because I think this is a very good one in terms of kind of just trying to do linear deck building, as well as just taking advantage of an archetype that has some of its interesting cards in the uncommon to common slot, and we have Rosemon. So we're going to be jumping in, as obviously today we're going to look at what's good, as it's time to dive into Rosemon, as this deck is obviously a green strategy, so we will be breaking down a bit of what the deck can do, but also some of the options you can play and different things you have available to you in the format. So starting off for the eggs, the interesting factor here is that until recently, there wasn't really much of a choice of the egg, I think, because this deck really wants to focus on nailing down opponent's Digimon and also hitting them hard. So the egg I want to focus on in terms of making it better for everybody to play is going to be Fluffymon. So Fluffymon is obviously the Terromon egg, and this is the one from EX7. So this one, when this Digimon deletes your opponent's Digimon in battle, you gain a memory. This is a very good effect, I think, because since you do some suspension in the deck, I do think this is an interesting way to also get rid of threats to get some memory back when you just want to run over maybe a rookie, and you don't have to worry about ace Digimon in this format. So it's pretty clear that by running over stuff that you're not afraid of, it will help you in the long run. But talking about the Palmons, we actually have a lot to talk about when it comes to our level 3s, because we are focusing more on being tribal, but there are a lot of elements here, and I'm going to start off with what I have before, in the end, there's going to be some more options. So focusing on what we have for the Palmons, first, I have the Structure Deck 5 Palmon. This is from the green Structure Deck. This one is easy, where if you attack an opponent's Digimon, this Digimon gets 2000 DP. The interesting factor of this card is simply just that you get DP buffs, and in this format, green, or at least for the Rosemon deck, it has the ability to get to a big board quickly, like a high level 6 fast. However, you do need some more DP, because there aren't too many inherent DP buffs in the archetype, unless you have to run some outside engine support. So I do think this card's really good, because a lot of times you could catch people off guard by running through their level 6 or their level 5s, because they won't realize that they have this buff, and then you're just going to clear it through. Additionally, we have the BT11, or this is the BT10 Palmon. This one reveals the top 4 cards of your deck, and you get to add 1 card with the vegetation or plant trait, but also you get to add 1 card with the fairy or fairy image traits to your hand. So interestingly, this card is very good in this deck, because fairy and plants are vegetation, and plant are all a part of the Palmon deck, as well as a part of Rosemon as a whole. So the key factor here is you are able to grab a lot of options in this deck, and it just helps you in the long run. Additionally, we are running the this is the BT11 Palmon, this one that during your turn, at the start of your turn, you get to draw 1 card if it's on the field. So interestingly enough, this is was created for Bloomlord to allow you to play this to the field, so you can draw cards as long as the body sticks around. In this format, this is very good, because what you're trying to do with this card is, if you have to hard play this in the early turn, when you get into your turn back from your opponent, if they do not get rid of this, you're going to be drawing 2 for the start of your turn. So in hindsight, this actually is just a way to just continuously farm more cards. You can't leave it on the field. Unfortunately, you will actually have access to Alliance and some cards you'll see later, but the point is you're not really going to have access to suspending them, so it is kind of a key understanding to where you want to use this card, because it is able to draw cards, but besides that, it's not really anything else except the body you play. It is searchable, of course, but the point is it's not necessarily something you have to play. This is more of a win more card if you want to try it. Moving into Palmon X is important because it can Digivolve specifically on top of a green egg for 0. So what you're doing with this card is you're always Digivolving on top of your Palmon. Its ability that when Digivolving or on play, you get to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. So the key factor is this card's still really good because if you can build into a level 6 and attack over whatever you suspend is great. However, if you still want to just suspend something, you can play this to do it or Digivolve on top of any of your Palmon in order to get that effect. And then it has the ability that when one of your when one of your tamers is played, you get to gain a memory. So you are actually able to reduce some play costs and play tamers. So this effect actually does give you a little bit more of a balance, so you can keep your turn, but also have a tamer setup. So very good. Moving into the level 4s, because there are some more level 3s, but we'll talk about them later. We're going to be talking about the Togemons, because this is really where we want to focus. So starting off with the Togemons you really want to play, I think EX1's Togemon is actually a great example as another DP buff. So it reads that during your turn, when one of your opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, this Digimon gets 2000 DP for the turn. I really think this is a cool inheritable, because with Palmon X and this Togemon, you can actually generate a lot of DP for your stack, so you can do some early checks if you have to, or just run over Digimon. So I think it's still a very cool inclusion to run this, maybe. Additionally, we have the BT14 Togemon. Now, this one is huge, I think, because what it does, if you don't know, is that when you would play a green tamer, by suspending this, or by suspending one of your green Digimon, you can reduce the play cost by 3. This is huge in this format because effectively, if you have access to your tamers early and you have Togemon online, you're basically playing them for 1 cost or for free. So it's very solid to have this. And then for its inheritable, that during your turn, when this Digimon would Digivolve, if you have a green tamer, reduce the Digi evolution cost by 1. So for this to actually matter is big because, like I said, this is how you climb quickly. Once you start Digivolving into the level 5s, level 6s, with some of these inheritables, you're keeping the memory down so that you can get into your level 6 quicker, get into your level 6 cheaper, and also be able to do damage a lot faster. Togemon X is also here because I do think you should play this card because it's just solid and a free Evo sometimes. So its effect is when Digivolving, one of your opponent's Digimon can't unsuspend until the end of your turn, or end of the turn, sorry. And then if Togemon is, or X anybody is in this Digimon's Digi-Evolution cards, you suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. So the key factor of this card is that technically it's supposed to lock down your opponent's Digimon that have already swung, so they can't get back into rotation. So that makes this card a little bit more defensive, but its offensive capability, if you Digivolve on top of Togemon, or if you have X antibody, which you can run, but you don't necessarily need to, is that when this card is able to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, this is just a good way to just start getting ready to start swinging over them. Because like I said, you get some DP buffs. These cards can clear level 4s. They can clear level 5s. I think you still need a level 5 on top of this to clear a level 6. But the point is, you can get the clearing effect that you want to do with the Rosemon deck a bit quicker, and you can do it with Togemon X because it helps out a lot quicker. Getting into Lilymon, because this is your fairy target from your searching. We also have an additional level 5 I want to talk about. But talking about Lilymon from EX1 first, this one has when one of your opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, this Digimon gets security attack +1 for the turn. I did want to mention this card because with the ability to suspend some cards, it's good to just have extra aggression on top of that. And I do think giving your deck the ability to do that is just really cool. On top of that, we have the starter deck 5 Lilymon. This one allows you to, when Digivolving, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and you get to add one level 6 or higher Digimon card among them to the hand. The biggest reason I wanted to mention this card is that this lets you find Rosemon really quick, or any other level 6 you want to play that's green. But the key factor here is that Lilymon looks for top 5, which is huge in this format because sometimes you're going to be needing to find your level 6s quickly, and this allows you to do that. Also, Lilymon X from BT15 is here. This one allows you to Digivolve on top of Lilymon for 0, obviously. And then if there is suspended Digimon, you get to gain a memory. But if Lilymon and or X antibody is in the sources, you're able to draw 1 card for each of your opponent's suspended Digimon. I think both of its effects are really good. So if you can pull off the combo, you're going to be getting a memory and then lots of draws. So very good. And then for its inheritable, this Digimon gets 1000 DP for each of your opponent's suspended Digimon. So very solid to just get really, really big and then allow your level 6 to start swinging. Additionally, I have Agitamon or Agitarmon. This card is interesting because, yes, this is an uncommon, which at first I didn't know that was. But the key factor of this card is the fact that it was very synergistic with Bloomlordmon. But for this deck, it is absolutely fantastic because for its main effect, by suspending one of your green Digimon, you may play one Digimon card with the vegetation, plant, or fairy in its traits from your hand for 3000 DP and without paying the cost. So the key factor is there are no aces, but this isn't really what you're doing with this card. What you're trying to do is establish a board presence so that you can maybe play a Palmon, go into Palmon X, suspend something, and then turn the Agitamon, if you haven't already suspended it or another Digimon, into your level 6s from that point. So it makes Agitarmon have a little bit more balance in this deck because it just allows you to kind of get your board wider. I wish you could play Bloomlord in this format, maybe not without Bloomlord, but pretty much most of the cards available for Bloomlord fit in this deck. So if you want to change it up from Tribal, you can. But yeah, I just wanted to mention Agitamon because I think it's a really good inclusion in the deck if you so choose. However, going with straight Lilymon and then Lilymon X isn't wrong either because it just synergizes so well. Going into our level 6s, we have a few options. This is where we kind of break the tribal spectrum, but all of them are a part of the actual Togemon line. So maybe, and I'm like, maybe, just maybe, it all works. So starting off, we have Rosemon from BT5. This one, interestingly enough, has Digiburst 3. So when you Digiburst 3, all of your Digimon with Digiburst gain Security Attack +1 for the turn. I like this card only because you can build really thick stacks in this format or for this deck. So with the X Antibody inclusions, you can burst off either their counterparts, which may or may not have good inheritables, and then keep the X Antibody inheritables, or vice versa, do whatever you want, just so that this thing can get Security Attack +1. So it can give it a bit more attack power for checking. I wish there was either a Rosemon X or the burst mode Rosemon available for this format, because I think this deck really would benefit from another level 6 type thing or level 7, but you know, unfortunately there is none. Talking about Rosemon from EX1, this one's interesting because this Digimon gets 1000 DP for each of your opponent's suspended Digimon, and then when attacking it suspends one of your opponent's Digimon. I like this effect because this makes this Rosemon a bit more proactive. So when it attacks, it's able to just simply suspend something is already good, because then effectively when you're attacking, this thing will gain an extra DP bare minimum, so it'll be like 12,000 in its check. However, with inheritables together, this thing can go to at least 13, 14, 15 even to do checks, so will survive unless it gets hit with a security bomb. That's really good. And then on top of that, both Rosemons synergize well because they're just Rosemons, so there's nothing wrong there. Moving into our other level 6s, first we have Lotusmon. I think this card's really good as a floodgate because this is what it was originally played for. So it reads, when your opponent plays a level 4 or lower Digimon, it immediately gets suspended. So I think the key factor of this card is the fact that it allows you to keep your opponent from going wide on your deck, because this is a stack deck. So a lot of times people will pressure you quickly by just playing out rookies or level or lower ones so they can just kind of swing in. But Lotusmon does protect you, so it is an option to play. And also, it being a 12,000 DP with the buffs, if you have this in a stack, is actually not that bad, because it will basically be forcing most things into its rotation, so to speak, like being able to keep them down and then let you run them over. Finally, we have Bancho Lilymon. I thought to throw this one in because it is technically an option for the deck because it is a level 6, but for its on deletion, you return one of your opponent's suspended Digimon to its owner's hands, and then it had the old text of trashing the sources. This was because, you know, this wasn't really a thing to mention until BT5, so old text from Digimon. But the main reason you play Bancho Lilymon is that it is searchable, so you can, you know, get it. But the key factor is you really want to use this thing as a way to just maybe clear Digimon, like level 6s, because if you suspend something but can't get rid of it, you can run it over and then just bounce it away. It seems kind of counterproductive, but I did think I'd mention it because it's still a card you can play in the deck. It's just maybe an option that you want to tinker around with. You totally could. Finally, I did want to talk about the additional Tamers first, and then some other Digimon before I get into the supplementary cards that we just got to make this deck better. Starting off, one of the problems this format had until recently was the fact that it didn't really have access to good Tamers for this strategy. So what I mean is, of the green pool until about, you know, recently, or by the time we get into the BT21 format, these were the only uncommon to common Tamers you could run. You had Ren, you have Willis, and you have people call him Winner. I'm calling him Winry. I think it sounds better. But point aside is, all three of these Tamers don't have inherent synergy with the Rosemon strategy. They don't really have inherent synergy with most decks besides their tribal decks. And unless you really wanted to tweak the deck a bit, in the case of Willis, you really don't have the ability to use it, except for its first skill of Willis, where during the start of your main phase or on play, you get to give one of your green Digimon 2k DP until the end of your opponent's turn. I really thought this was a good effect because this is unfortunately not a memory setter, but the point is you still get the DP buff, so it allows the deck to be good, and you can play Willis for 1 with Togemon, so it's not the worst interaction, you know, is the best way to put it. It is not the worst combination of cards I would try, because it really does give you some ground to fight back with. Winry and Ren, unfortunately, don't really offer anything to the green deck because there's no save cards, so unfortunately Ren does nothing, and then Winry focuses almost exclusively on face-up security cards, which unfortunately the deck doesn't really actually have access to. That's always outside of engine, so effectively Winry was useless, Ren is useless. You'd only play them in deck because they're 3 drops for free, but point aside is Willis was the best one you could play, but when I get into the last part of the video, with the new cards you can run, this actually changes, and you'd still play Willis, I think, because him being able to give that 2k DP is really something monumental. Talking about supplementary Digimon, if you want to break the tribal aspect, you have access to something like the BT19 Terriermon and Garglemon. So both of these are interestingly not being played for their actual effects. You're playing them for their inheritables, where you get to suspend your opponent's Digimon. So in my opinion, this was one of the main reasons where if you wanted to change the deck a bit more to fit like the Garglemon cards, you could, because Willis and Terriermon and Garglemon, all of them kind of have synergy. You can play the, I think it's the Henry, and I think the Henry card, there's one Henry card in the format. I think it's with his sister, but I could be wrong. I think that card's not available. I think it's just her specific option. I mean, her tamer. But the point is, these cards still offer good inheritables, so it gives the deck a little bit more credence. Finally, another card I wanted to mention is Arbormon, before I get into the last bit of the video, obviously. Arbormon's strength is that it is treated as a vegetation, so you can search this card out, but also it digivolves on top of your tamers and your Digimon, so you might want to play Arbormon because this card is a hybrid for game, but more importantly than that, it can build you a stack on your tamers out of nowhere, where maybe your opponent is expecting you not to do anything. You digivolve into Arbormon, and now all of a sudden you can get back in the game, so I did want to mention them. Finally, I will mention the final cards I think are important to look at, that being the brand new cards out of ST20. So out of ST20, or actually ST21, sorry, the cards here are very important because the new Togemon line, or technically the new Palmon line, do actually offer the deck a bit more power. So starting off, what do we have? So we have something like the Palmon here from ST21. So pretty much its first effect doesn't matter as much because you don't really have a ton of the adventure cards to trash. I mean, you'd have to change up the deck a lot, but the point is this card is a vegetation, so it's searchable. Point is, if you trash one card with the adventure trait, you draw 2. So pretty much if you pitch itself or any of the other Digimon I'll mention in a second, you can just draw 2, so very cool. But also all turns, this Digimon gets 1000 DP. Very cool to give the stack you have an extra DP no matter what. So effectively all of your level 6s should be 12k. Bare minimum, pretty cool. Talking about Togemon quick, because Togemon is also a common card, so you might want to use it for its ability to on play when digivolving. If your tamers with the adventure trait have 3 or more total colors, this Digimon may digivolve into a Digimon card with the adventure trait in the hand without paying the cost. So I'll get into a second why you would do that, but more importantly, it has the same inheritable that all turns this Digimon gets 1000 DP. Point is, this is very good, but you're probably thinking, well, how can we play the adventure tamers? They don't have synergy. Well, this is where the deck and the whole structure decks help out a lot. So starting off, we have Jokido and Mimi Tachikawa. These are insane because they do help out a lot this deck because it desperately needed a green tamer that actually had some importance in the deck. So what you're doing with this is that if you have a Digimon with the adventure trait, you gain 1 memory, and then for your turn, when any of your cards with the adventure trait would be played from your hand, by suspending this tamer, you reduce the play cost by 1. You're probably thinking, why is this good? This is actually very good because what you're trying to do with this card is allow you to get a sort of cheap engine going with your Togemon, because with the BT14 Togemon, you can suspend the Togemon, play this out, then you could hard play something like the Palmon from this structure deck and then immediately suspend this to make it a 2-cost drop. The point is you're constantly just trying to cycle as well as boost up. Additionally, you do have other cards you can play from the structure decks to utilize it. You don't actually need to make a massive engine of the adventure cards because you're not trying to do that. The thing you're wanting to run is multiple copies of Joe and Mimi, but also maybe pair this up with a couple copies of the Sora and Kari, because Sora and Kari at the start of your turn, if you have a Digimon with the adventure trait, you gain 1 memory. And then when any Digimon card with the adventure trait would be played from your hand, by suspending this tamer, reduce the play cost. This is a red and yellow one, but the main reason you're trying to use this tamer out as well is so that when you do have any of your adventure trait cards on the field, you're gaining that extra memory. So what I want to talk about quickly here is that until these cards were released, I didn't really want to talk about them too much. However, you have some pretty solid cards if you want to slide them into the deck. This includes the ST20 Tentomon being a floodgate, where your opponent can't reduce Digi-Evolution cost. It is green, so the point is you can run this additionally. Kabuterimon also does something very similar, but Kabuterimon allows you to play out your different adventure type tamers from your hand for free. So pairing this up with Togemon really can help you out, but you have to have 1 or fewer, so basically this will get you 2. But the point is this engine's very solid because it gives the Kabuterimon a chance to do something, and it offers piercing to your deck, which is something very cool. And the final one I wanted to mention here is going to be the Mega Kabuterimon. So the Mega Kabuterimon from this set is really good because it works as a pseudo boss with your Rosemons. So the main thing you're trying to do here is that on play when Digivolving, one of your Digimon unsuspends. Then for every 2 colors your tamers with the adventure trait have, you get to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. So if you play both the colors or both the uncommon adventure tamers, you will be at least getting 4 colors. So you will be at least suspending up to 2 Digimon because you'll have 4 colors from the 2 tamers. So this is interesting, but then also during your turn, once return, when any of your other Digimon are played or Digivolved, if any of them have the adventure trait, one of your Digimon gains Alliance for the turn, and then one of your Digimon may attack. So you're probably thinking, well, how is this pretty useful? Well, the point is this card by itself, if you've Digivolved into it, allows you to simply either hard play a Palmon so that you can trigger the Alliance and allow this thing to attack for like 9k or something like that, or with inheritables it can actually get really big really quickly. But more importantly, if you just Digivolve on top of this thing, you're passing Alliance as a passive, like the inheritable to like a Rosemon, and that already makes it and deals with one of the big issues the deck has, which is its ability to be aggressive, but also the ability for DP, because you can just suspend something else with the usage of Alliance given to the Rosemon, and the Rosemon will get really big and do a lot of damage. So I did want to mention that because the adventure cards really do help out this deck a lot, because it was very much struggling, I think, to do more damage in the format. But I think because of these included cards, you're really going to be able to step up and pressure the format pretty well. So guys, that's all I've got for you today. I did want to mention this deck because I do think it's a very good option for those who are trying out the Regulation Battle Volume 1 format. There's a lot to tweak here, but also this deck is pretty linear. Its strategy makes a lot of sense, and you can add a lot of cards to help you out. But guys, that's all I've got for you today. I do hope you join up with the Ed Army. As always, I am signing off, and for all of you out there, to sign on.